welcome in to another episode of Matt's Sports Talk. And of course, if you watch my videos from yesterday that I have uploaded to my YouTube channel, you will have seen that I recapped all of the games from the regular season because there were a lot of exciting matchups on Saturday. And I'd also mentioned in my video yesterday that I would be I would be previewing in more specific detail all the playoff matchups coming your way on Wednesday night and breaking down more specifically where everybody finished in terms of the 8 teams that made the postseason and where those 8 teams were projected to be in the preseason. So without further ado, we will dive into that. And looking first at Indiana Wesleyan, who is that number 1 seed, and they officially have clinched home court advantage throughout the playoffs, and they achieved that in their win at Goshen last Wednesday night. And the Wildcats come into the Crossroads League tournament with a 26-2 overall record, 16-2 in the conference. Their only losses of the year coming to then number 14 St. Francis back on February 8th, and then losing to currently number 12 Marion on 2 days ago this past Saturday. And the Wildcats, of course, they've had a really good year, and I know that over the last month at times they've really struggled because they were without one of their best players and leading scorers, Lily Frazier. She suffered a wrist injury back on January 25th in the home game against Huntington. And Frazier, despite the injury, she was, in fact, the day that she had the surgery, she came to the road game out at Grace College back on Wednesday, January 29th, and supported her team. And obviously she's been to every single game since then. And everybody hopes and prays that she will be cleared to play in the quarterfinal matchup against Goshen College coming up on Wednesday night. And for the Wildcats, outside of Frazier, not being able to play for the last month, the Wildcats have had a lot of players step up, including redshirt junior Taylor Folkema, as well as freshman Ellie Kelleher, and fifth-year graduate student Maddie Lawrence, as well as Emily Mattingly, who is a sophomore, and Corin Grivey, who is a redshirt sophomore. And of course, and really for the Wildcat, and not just that, but also Tori Thompson, who's a sophomore coming off the bench. She's been playing in the second unit off the bench these last several games over the last month, and she has played absolutely phenomenal, and I think she's a big part to the Wildcat offense. Her defense is absolutely amazing, and she's really playing her best ball right now of the season. Of course, we saw something similar at this time last year with Riley Parker, who graduated from IWU last year, transferred to IWU from IUPUI, and came to Indiana Wesleyan, played for Coach Whaley, and then graduated this year. And I think she's doing graduate work up at Huntington University right now. But still, for Tori Thompson to just be playing this well at this point in the season, it's really good to see. So that's a little bit more in depth of the Wildcats. And they were projected to be first in preseason, so they obviously are. They exceeded or at least met the expectations of at least their projection. And then, of course, moving down to St. Francis. St. Francis 25-3 overall, 15-3 in conference play. Their only losses, not just in conference but overall, have come. One of which, has come to Marion, and 1 to IWU, and then 1 to Spring Arbor, the first time the Spring Arbor Cougars and the St. Francis Cougars met up in Michigan. And for St. Francis, they were also projected to finish second in the conference, so they're exactly right where they were projected to be. And then of course you look at Marion 22-6 now overall, 15-3 in the conference. Their 3 conference losses, one of which came to IWU, and then one of which I believe came to, and then the other 2 came to St. Francis. So for Marion, one of their 3 conference losses was to IWU. The other 2 were to the Cougars of St. Francis. And for the Lady Knights, they've had a really good year. Now, they have had they've had some good losses, but they've also had one bad loss. But still, despite that, they finished third in the conference, exactly where they were projected to be in preseason. And then looking at Spring Arbor, they are in fourth place, 18-10 overall, 11-7 in the conference. And they also have secured the number 4 seed in the postseason. Marion securing the number 3 seed in the postseason. St. Francis the number 2 seed, and of course Iowa the number 1 seed. So for Spring Arbor, the 4 seed in the league tournament, they are 11-7 in conference, and they've had some. I mean, they've had some really good games. I mean, obviously, they only lost by 3 points to Rio Grande down in Puerto Rico over Christmas break, and beat Morningside out of Iowa by 7, also in Puerto Rico over Christmas break, and that, of course, might boost their resume a little bit for national tournament hopes. But for Spring Arbor, they have 7 conference losses, and 2 of which came to Iowa, the other 2 to Marion, and then the 5th one to St. Francis, and then the 6th conference loss to Huntington, and then the 7th conference loss, which really was a bad loss for Spring Arbor, that came to Goshen the first time those 2 teams met. And that is a little bit more in-depth about Spring Arbor. Spring Arbor was projected to finish in 5th. They finished 4th, so literally right where they were projected to be, right about that bottom 4 to 5 threshold, which obviously is not quite the middle of the pack, but kind of in that 4 to 5 spot, all by themselves. And that is where Spring Arbor finished then for the Lady Foresters of Huntington, 17-11, 10-8 in the conference. And of course, I mentioned a little bit more in depth yesterday about what they've done overall compared to the last few years, what they've done in conference compared to the last few years. For Huntington, they've had a really good year at home. They were, I believe, 12-4 at home last year. They went 11-4 at home this year. One big improvement, though, for head coach Darby Maggard and company. They finished 6-6 on the road this year, at least in the regular season. I mean, obviously, once they go on the road to play at Spring Arbor on Wednesday night, obviously that road record might matter at that point. But at least for now, 6-6 in the regular season on the road. A big improvement from last year on the road, where they were just 3-10. So a much bigger improvement for them. They were projected 4th. They finished 5th, 1 game behind Spring Arbor. So obviously Huntington was finished exactly right where they were projected to be. Now, one thing to note for Huntington, they did finish 10-8 in the conference. However, if they had won a couple of more games, really 3 games that they should have won. The second game at Bethel back on January 29th. They also had the home game against Mount Vernon Nazarene back on Saturday, December 7th, that they should have won. And then, of course, obviously, I guess you could make the argument that they probably should have beaten Indiana Wesleyan in that home thriller back on November 20th to open up the conference. So for Huntington, if they had won those 3 games, they'd be sitting 13-5 right now, which definitely would be enough to get them into that number 4 spot. And then they would be hosting Spring Arbor in the quarterfinal matchup instead of going up there. But still, I'm not trying to talk bad about any teams, not trying to be biased toward any teams, but just for Huntington, they've kind of had an up and down year, and it's just, sometimes you look at the records and you say, well, maybe this particular team should have had a few more wins. I guess you could say that about the Lady Foresters of Huntington University, but still, you take away those 3 games that could have gone either way, I guess would be a little bit better way to say it. But you take away those 3 games that could have gone either way, 50-50, but still, you take that away, Huntington still finished above 500 in the conference for the very first time under Coach Maggard, so that's a very, very big improvement for them, and well-deserved as well. Then you get down to Mount Vernon Nazarene in that number 6 seed, at 15-13, 7-11 in the conference. This is a Mount Vernon team that only won 9 total games last year and finished 3-15 in league play, missing out in the Crossroads League tournament for just the second time under head coach Amanda Short. So obviously for them, this is a much bigger improvement for them. Now, of course, you could say that there were probably at least 3 to 4 games that Mount Vernon Nazarene had this year where they could have, maybe where they could have won to have a total of, at least 9 or 10 conference wins as opposed to 7. But obviously, you'll still take the improvement from last year all day long for MVNU. And of course, these last couple games, they've been without their leading scorer, Teresa Maggio, and yet, despite not having her for their last home game of the season against Grace this past Saturday, MVNU was still able to win that game without their leading scorer, and also without their leading scorer that's pretty near the leading scorer in the whole entire league as far as that goes. So that's obviously well deserved for them, and that's why they're that number 6 seed. Now for Mount Vernon, they were projected to finish 8th. They finished 6th, so a couple spots on either end, not too terribly bad. They practically finished exactly where they were projected to be. And then this is a little bit of a surprise. Bethel, that number 7 seed, they were projected to finish, I believe, they were projected to finish last, and they finished 7th. So a little bit of an improvement. Obviously, Bethel well exceeded expectations this year. This was a Bethel team that was 1-17 in conference play last year, and this year they won 13 games. They only won, I want to say they only won 6 total games last season. So obviously a much, much bigger improvement this year under head coach Scott Paulsgrove of what they have been able to do. And they finished 6-12 in the conference. So that's obviously well improved from being 1-17 in league play 1 year ago. And then they got that number 7 seed, and of course they were projected 10th. So a really big improvement for the Lady Pilots, and they will be, of course, traveling to 2-seeded St. Francis in Fort Wayne coming up on Wednesday night. Then you get down to Goshen and that final playoff spot as the 8th seed for the Lady Maple Leafs. They were projected 9th in preseason. They finished 8th, so literally they finished exactly right where they were projected to finish. So obviously, that's an improvement under head coach Tyra Carver. The Lady Maple Leafs finished 11-16 overall, I should say. They went 5-13 in conference play. Now you look back to 1 year ago for the Lady Maple Leafs. They also finished in 8th 1 year ago. They finished 4-14 in league play. This year they're 5-13. So they did win one more conference game this year than what they won last year. So a big improvement for them. And right now they're 11-16 this year. And you look at what they were last year overall, they were 9-20 overall last year. So they've lost 4 less games this year, won 2 more games overall. So a big improvement for them in that number 8 seed. And then, of course, the 2 teams that did not make the tournament, starting with Grace, 10-18 overall, 3-15 in conference play. And I mentioned yesterday they've had tons of injuries this year, and they've been without pretty much outside of their 5 starters. They really didn't have any bench players to go to for these last several games as they ended their season. Now for Grace, they were projected to finish 6th, and they finished 5th last year as they went 9-9 in the conference. And of course for them, they got the 5 seed last year because of the higher Massey rating over Huntington. And for the Lady Lancers, they have just struggled this year, of course, due to injuries, but yet they fought hard and did not make the playoffs. But they definitely have more, at least build a little bit of momentum going into next year, and obviously, getting more players next year as they're losing several players this year that are seniors. So for head coach Dan Davis and his team, they have a lot to take away from this year, some things that they can improve on for next year as well. So. And that was Grace in terms of where they were projected to be, where they finished, and what they did overall this year. And then finally, in last place for the Taylor Trojans, they finished 7-21 overall, 2-16 in the conference. This was really an unexpected year for Taylor. They were projected to finish 7th, and they finished 10th. So these were 2 really biggest shocks that they had this year in terms of where they were projected to finish. They were projected 7th. They finished last. And for the Trojans, they just had a down year. Now, despite having a down year, they were in it for a lot of the conference games. But at least for one good thing for Taylor, they won their final game of the year on the road at Bethel this past Saturday to get their 2nd conference win and finish 2-16. But you compare that to what they did a year ago. A year ago, they finished 7th. They were 12-17 overall, 7-11 in conference play, and you look at now 7-21 overall, 2-16 they finished in conference play. So they lost 5 more conference games this year than what they did last year. And of course they like I said, 12-17 overall last year, and then this year overall 7-21. So 4 more losses this year than last year, and 4 more losses in conference play than last year as well. And that's the specific breakdown of all 8 teams that made the league tournament, where all 8 of them were projected to be, and then breaking down a little bit more specifically the 2 teams that did not make it, what they did this year, where they were projected to be. So I hope that was really, really helpful to you. And then, and I hope it was very helpful to you. And if it was, then I would encourage you, or not encourage you, but if it was helpful, please like this video, leave me a comment down below, or subscribe to my channel. Any one of those 3 options helps me out tremendously, and I appreciate it so much. And thanks so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope you also have a great rest of your week. And then I'll be recording a video recording a video on Thursday, or actually probably Wednesday afternoon, recapping all the men's quarterfinal actions that start tomorrow night, and then recording a video on Thursday, recapping all the women's quarterfinal games. And then, of course, previewing the upcoming men's semifinals that will be on Friday night. I'll be doing that Wednesday afternoon. And then Thursday afternoon, previewing the women's semifinals that will be taking place Saturday afternoon. And that will be at 1 p.m. will be the game times on Saturday afternoon, and 7 p.m. on Friday night for the men's semifinal action. So I hope again that you enjoyed this video, and have a blessed rest of your day.